Chapter 3. Forming a Plan. The mayor's assistant, Hubert Pommel, greeted the class at City Hall the next day. "If you children will follow me," he said after pointing out the exits and restrooms, "we'll begin our tour in Meeting Hall." Ms. Freckle clapped her hands twice, very quickly. The sharp sound echoed through City Hall's marble entryway. "Chop, chop," she said. "Follow Mr. Pommel, children." The class fell into two single-file lines, marching side by side behind. Mr. Pommel. Ms. Freckle walked behind them. Ms. Freckle was a strict lady. She was one of the strictest teachers in school. Gus knew she was just watching out for them, and that she wanted the best for them. But sometimes it got pretty annoying. Have to follow her direction all the time, and act like you were in the army or something. Gus and Hank made sure to get in different lines toward the middle, so they could talk without Ms. Freckle or Mr. Pommel overhearing. "Have you decided how to distract Ms. Freckle yet?" Hank whispered.
"How to distract Mrs. Freckle yet?"
Gus nodded once.
Gus nodded once.
"More importantly," Gus said, "have you transferred that sword to my character yet?" "Heck no," Hank said, a little too loudly. "Not yet." From the back of the line, Ms. Freckle hissed through her teeth. "Not a peep, class," she snapped. "You must listen to me. You all know it's my job to protect you." Gus rolled his eyes. Ms. Freckle was always saying that, like her students really needed protecting. Hank continued in his quietest whisper. "I'll transfer the sword after you've fulfilled your part of the bargain."
"Your part of the bargain,"
he said. No way, Gus said. "Transfer it first. In fact, do it right now." "Don't you trust me?" Hank said. "Not at all," Gus said. He smiled. Chapter 4. The Wrong Key. "Fine," Hank said. Chapter 4. The Wrong Key. "Fine," Hank said. He glanced over his shoulder at Ms. Freckle and then looked at Mr. Pommel at the front of the line. The group was still moving down a long, windowless hallway toward the back of the building. Hank pulled his phone from his pocket. He tapped the screen a couple of times. Gus looked over his shoulder. Gus really wanted a phone like that, but his parents wouldn't let him get anything fancy. His phone was just so they could find him, and he could find them in an emergency. No games, no videos, and definitely no apps to connect with Battle Knights. Gus watched Hank's fingers slide across the screen. It pulled the sword, a shimmering blue blade that sparkled under a gold silver halo from Hank's account to Gus's. "There," Hank said. "Happy?" Gus smirked. "I'll be happy when you hit save," he said. "Oh, yeah," Hank said. His face went red. "I forgot." He tapped the little save button and then slipped his phone back to his pocket.
into his pocket.
At the same instant, Mr. Pommel stopped.
Mr. Pommel stopped.
Then the class stopped behind him.
Stopped behind him.
Mr. Pommel cleared his throat.
Pommel cleared his throat.
This, he said in a loud and important voice, is the meeting hall.
The meeting
It is empty now,
It is empty now.
which is why we can go in.
This is why we can go
He turned around and put his hand on the knob.
And on the knob.
He wiggled the knob.
He wiggled the knob.
It didn't turn.
It didn't turn.
The door was
The door
locked.
was locked.
Mr. Pommel smiled. He said, stammering a bit. Let's see.
Let's see.
He dug in his pocket.
In his pocket.
Finally, with some jangling and jiggling, he pulled out his keyring, full of keys.
Full of keys.
I'll just unlock this door now, Mr. Pommel said, fumbling with the keys.
Fumbling with the keys.
He tried one in the lock, but it didn't work.
But it didn't work.
Whoops, wrong key,
Wrong key,
he said.
he said.
I thought it was a silver one. Gus stood on his toes for a better look.
For better.
Mr. Pommel's key ring must
Mr. Pommel's key ring must
have had 100 keys on it. This could take all day.
It could take all day.
He put up his hand.
He put up his hand.
Yes, Gus,
Yes, Gus.
Ms. Freckle said.
Freckle said.
Gus turned around to face her.
To face her.
May I use the restroom,
May I use
ma'am?
the restroom,
He
ma'am?
said.
He said.
The teacher smiled.
She smiled.
Gus knew Ms. Freckle absolutely loved
Miss Freckle absolutely loved
it when her students called her May
student called her ma'am.
and used may instead of can.
Instead of can.
Of course, Ms. Freckle said with a big smile.
With a big smile.
Do you know where it is?
Where it is?
Yes, ma'am,
Yes, ma'am.
Gus said.
Gus said.
Mr. Pommel was kind enough to point it
Kind enough to point it
out when we arrived.
out when we
Ms.
arrived.
Freckle looked for a
Miss Freckle looked
moment
for
like
a
she might pass out with joy.
pass out with joy.
While she was still smiling and beaming all over the place, Gus winked at Hank. Then he stepped away from the line and walked back down the long hallway. The bathroom was on the other side of the front lobby. Gus's sneakers squeaked and
Gus's sneakers
chirped as he crossed the marble-tiled floor.
chirped as he crossed the marble.
On the way, he stopped to look at the bronze statue standing in the middle of
Statue standing in the middle
the lobby.
of the lobby.
The statue was of a very tall
Of a very tall
and very serious-looking woman. Her strong jaw and wide
strong jaw and
mouth made her seem
mouth
powerful,
seem
like nothing could stop her.
Nothing could stop her.
There are hard times ahead, her stance seemed to say.
Her stance seemed to say.
But I will lead the people of Raven's Pass safely through them to a golden age.
A golden age.
In one hand, she held a cane, more like a staff, really. A pair of spectacles dangled from the fingers of her
Fingers of her
other hand.
other hand.
A velvet rope stopped him from getting too close,
From getting too close.
but he could read the
But he could
plaque.
read the
It read,
plaque.
Raven's Pass's first mayor, Catherine Verteidiger.
Verteidiger.
Gus got a last
Got a last
look at the statue's
look at the
face.
statue's
Then he
face.
turned and headed for the bathroom.
And headed from the bathroom.
Between the men's room and women's room was an unmarked door.
Was an unmarked
Maybe
door.
that's the cellar
The
door,
cellar door.
Gus thought.
Gus thought.
He tried the handle. It was locked.
It was locked.
Can I help
Can I
you?
help you?
A voice said.
Voice said.
Gus spun.
Gus spun.
A woman stood there. She wore glasses and held a long cane in one hand, and she looked identical to the
She looked identical to
statue.
the statue.
Chapter 5. Meeting the Mayor.